Hey everyone, MegaJeff here with the topic totally out of left field for me at least. I know nobody probably is expecting this because I have talked about it briefly, but rarely. So it's not well known, this genre on my channel. But it came up recently because if you saw my video from a couple videos ago where I was given 3 crates of records from a friend, I inherited his, I'm going to say inherited because he didn't like pass away or anything, but I acquired his selection of a few box sets. Well, let's just jump into this. Let's start with this one. So in that entire 3 albums, and I kept a good majority of it, and I've got some I'm going to show my singer to see if he wants. I cleaned up and kept a lot of the collections, the Creedence, the Poco, the James Taylor, Santana, stuff like that. But when it came down to it, and I was telling my friend this, I said, you know what? I think out of all those records, a lot of great classic rock, the one thing that I gravitated towards and listened to the first week or so the most and appreciated the most was the swing era sets. Believe it or not, it's, he had, and there was 5 of these, so there's, it's a Time Life box set series, and there were 5 box sets, each one with 3 albums covering the years. And this is the weird thing, I kind of wondered where this is going. So you got 37 to 38, 38 to 39, 40 to 41, 41 to 42, 44 to 45. So either there's a 43 set in here that's missing, and maybe this is not all of them. I need to look that up. Or for some reason, there was no music release in 43. Anyway, I made a comment in the video that I thought I had seen these before, something like this before, at a thrift store, almost bought it. When I went to log these into Discogs, turns out this was the set I saw, because this is the set, I mentioned how they look kind of old, and sure enough, these particular sets were released in the early 70s. They have been reissued by Time Life ad nauseum, probably every couple years since then. So there's series through the 80s. And the other sets that have come out, 80s, 90s, or whatever, have a black cover with similar picture. And that is, when I saw that online, I'm like, that's the set that I saw, that I picked up, that I almost bought at a thrift store, because each box was, just a couple dollars, and they had 3 albums. Each set comes with 3 albums, and then a hardcover book that explains, and it's kind of nice. They got pictures and everything, history book on all of the era, the bands, things along that line. I opened every one of these sets. 2 or 3 of the sets were still in shrink wrap. He had not even opened them. I took them all out. I ultrasonically cleaned every album, because some of them did have some, even the ones that were still sealed had some dust and stuff, and some just grimy stuff that was starting to grow on the records. Not really, just looked like maybe a bug got in there, and there was some dry stuff in there. Ultrasonically cleaned them all. Wiped the books down with a anti-mold thieves cleaner from Young Living. We do essential oils, and so I did that. And I had all of these boxes opened, because some of these have been out in his garage, and they were starting to smell kind of moldy. And I had all the boxes separated, taken apart, laid out with the diffuser of the thieves cleaner going for entire day. I kept refilling it and going the whole day. So they smell a lot better. They're a lot cleaner now. And I plopped one on like the first day I got them, and I was just surprised. I'm like, this stuff is just, it's great. Now, big band music. Why is Jeff into big band music? So I got into big band music back in the 80s. We're gonna delve back a little bit, just a little bit of my history. I didn't get into it a ton. Obviously, as a drummer, everybody expects that you know and like Buddy Rich, and I do. I'm not a huge fan. I don't have a huge collection, but I have what I can get. And so, but back in the 80s is when I first discovered it. In 85. I was in the military. My parents came down to visit. I was stationed in Mississippi. They came down to visit. We took a weekend trip over to New Orleans, which is hour and a half away or so. And they like big band music, of course, my parents being older. And we went to what's a place called the Blue Room, and we saw the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra. Of course, Tommy Dorsey long since passed, but got to see the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra. So it was all of some of his band members and his band. And I thought it was great. The drummer, I thought for a big band, the drummer had drum solo. I mean, it was like Buddy Rich stuff. It was just pretty, heavy, fun stuff. So in the 80s, I started, you look in a dollar bin, you get them. I got like the best of the big bands. And I just absorbed these. This has got everything on it from Benny Goodman to, Duke Ellington, Woody Herman, Glenn Miller. It's got all the hits. Absorbed it. I knew these songs backwards and forwards. Oh, you didn't, I remember getting these at the Bass Exchange on bass in the late 80s, Woody Herman collection. These are just those cheapy, reissue hits. The Benny Goodman collection, 2 albums on one. Again, I remember getting this at the Bass Exchange on bass. Then you find here and there, things like Buddy Rich versus, Al Roach. And it's like, Max Roach. You find these type of things just in the dollar bin here and there. Jazz Gold, Buddy Rich, Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich drum battles, things like that. Then in the 90s, I guess, Neil Peart put out the Burning for Buddy series, where he went in and brought in, and again, just these are like they are tribute albums. Got all kinds of different drummers from all different walks of life. Everything from jazz drummers to rock drummers. Kenny Aronoff, the guy from Guns N' Roses. Just all kinds of different drummers came in. Steve Gadd, a lot of jazz guys. And with some of the original guys from Buddy Rich's orchestra, I think the saxophone player was one of the original guys. There's some guys that might have been in there. And they played Buddy Rich songs. And there's video series on these that show the behind the scenes of these people in the studio learning the stuff and reading the charts. And these are modern band recordings of Buddy Rich songs. Absolutely love these albums. They're phenomenal stuff. They got everybody. Simon Phillips, Neil plays on them. Of course, Rod Morgenstein, Steve Gadd, Kenny Aronoff, Bill Bruford, Billy Cobham. Steve Smith of Journey. It just goes on. Greg Bissonette. It's great. Then in the 90s, this band toured, and there were 2 bands, I guess. There was an East Coast and a West Coast band. I was living in the East Coast at the time that they toured. I was in New York. I went to the Bottom Line Club in New York City, saw the Burning for Buddy series, and it had one of my absolute favorite drummers, Dave Weckl, on drums. I went to this small club, and I know I've told this story before. I recall. Small club, and I was sitting at the stage, at a table, sitting there. The stage was right here. I was sitting at a table right in front of Dave's drum set. I mean, the way that it was positioned, his drum set was near the front because he's there, and then they had the orchestra over there, and I just was in awe, just sitting there watching him play. It was interesting because sitting to my right, a table or 2 back, was Buddy Rich's daughter. Sitting directly behind me at a table was Soupy Sales, the comedian who was up in age at that point still. It was just a phenomenal show in a small club. Great jazz show. So absolutely love that. So then, you get into vinyl. I start trying to buy a lot of it. So I don't have it. So, but in the same set that my friend gave was the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra. So I did keep this. I cleaned it up. It's kind of rough. I'd love to get a replacement for it. It's kind of rough. But even after being cleaned, it's got some scratches and stuff. I like this kind of stuff. This is an album released in 1964, so it's a nice old record. This, when I bought this a couple years ago at a Goodwill, it's been all repaired with tape and everything. Swing in the Spring by Benny Goodman. At the time, and probably still, this is probably the oldest record in my collection. This was released in 1958. I don't know if I've picked up anything since then, so it was kind of neat. So these are these are not even original recordings because this stuff was all recorded. Well, I don't know. Some of these may have been recorded. Maybe they were still going in the 50s. I didn't look. Some of them are probably recorded and reissued later. Swing, 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 Benny Goodman. This is from like 1964. Again, so these older albums, and you find these. I see them. I don't buy them unless they are in really good condition. Artie Shaw double record set. I picked this up at a thrift store. It looked brand new. I had to grab it. It was like $1. So I grabbed the big band stuff. I have a buddy Rich, or I think I have a buddy Rich up in there. I don't know why I didn't grab that. His stuff, because he did record stuff all the way up into the 80s, up until his death. He was still pretty active. So that's a little different than the stuff that's maybe from the earlier years, because he did do more stuff up into the later generations. But overall, I found these sets to be some of the best things that I have in those things, in those boxes that I got for free, because the recordings are great, the packaging is great, and it's just nice to have. And it's, you know, it's an all-star. They got everything on here from, you know, Gene Krupa to Artie Shaw to Nat King Cole to Duke Ellington. Now, the thing that I thought was interesting, I always have pictured, because I went to the concert with my parents, I always thought, this is my parents' music. This is their age of music. But when I really stopped and think about it, this first set's 1937. It goes through 1945. My dad was born in 1932. He'd have been like 13 when this came out. No, this is not really his era. This would be more my grandparents' era. Now, by the time my parents got to teen years, this stuff was probably borderline classic rock. Now, I mean, you know, it's probably more classic. It was probably still going at their time. Music had not probably radically changed. But this would have been stuff that maybe they grew up with as a child. But by the time they hit teen years and those rebellious 20s and stuff, I'm not sure what this music was. Probably, you know, not as prominent. Post-war, you know, some of this might have still been around. Anyway, they did appreciate it. They probably grew up with it. But I just got to thinking, when this stuff came out, my parents were children. They were kids. They were preteens. So it just really put things in perspective of how I was thinking. I'm like, wow, you know, my grandfather was born in like 1901. So he'd have been in his 30s here. It might have even been, maybe not even his, well, yeah. I mean, you know, he'd have been probably into it, or close there. So it's kind of weird there when I really put the date on it to see how, where it would fit in the chronology of my family. So yeah, it's just interesting. And to me, it's like neat to go back and listen and think, 1938, these songs are, what are these, you know, 1938. Go back in time. It's just a going back in time and putting yourself in the position of what was going on at the time. What was a crowd of people listening to this? What were the people playing this? You know, what was the room like? You know, just the interesting things from this history. So these sets just immediately, I just took them in and I started listening to them thinking, this stuff is just really amazing for what it is. But anyway, what's your thoughts? I know I'm more into the rock stuff. I'm more of a rock guy. What does Jeff listen to big band music? I like it. I think there's just a lot of stuff here. And, you know, as a drummer, as a musician myself, I try to be diverse. I listen to a lot of jazz. I listen to a lot of smooth jazz. I listen to a lot of, you know, quite a bit of big band music. And so it's very interesting to hear all the different styles of music out there. And so I appreciate it. But what are your thoughts? Do you have much affinity towards older styles of music that were definitely way before your generation? Just curious what your thoughts are, and if I'm the only one out there that's really weird. But anyway, that's it for this one. I'll see you later. Rock on and rock hard, or jazz on and swing hard. Later.